So, what I would love to see personally happen with professional martial arts is these big companies like UFC and Bellator, when the turning of the tide comes for the economy to be changing over to something that's not pyramidal but circular, and a true currency, non-usurous system, that the UFC, any proceeds that go towards any proceeds from profit from people actually is cycled back into the community and not given to celebrity shareholders, so that new gyms open up and there's available classes in schools teaching self-defense and this sort of thing, to where it's available to the youth and to the people. So I think that this would be a huge step for this, because this isn't really a sport per se. I mean, it is treated like a sport, but it's really intimate and it teaches unarmed combat and gives people confidence, and it shows people the vulnerabilities of the human body, so that self-discipline is learned alongside honor and respect for one another. So this would obviously have a huge effect in schools and on bullying and eliminate bullying itself. And I just am very hopeful about that for the future. So some of my issues with the UFC are some of the ones that, if you know a guy in the lightweight division, his name is Ali Quinta. He points out several of them, and he rants on about it, and he's very vocal. And he says so many true things. I really love his rants, and I love watching him as a fighter. He's developed in his skill set so much, his boxing and everything else. He's been, I believe he trains with doing plyometrics, which is like the speed of sport training. So like you train fast, you do a lot of fast twitch, and you get shorter and shorter breaks to where you build up your oxygen levels and your cardio, and while still remaining explosive. Another guy who does that is Dos Anjos, Rafael Dos Anjos, otherwise known as RDA. And plyometrics has become really popular and has helped a lot of fighters, and I recommend it as a training technique, because really what it does is train fast twitch and train you to be explosive for longer periods of time, which is very important in a true fight scenario. And in the cage or in the octagon, it really comes out as, or in Bellator, the circle, it really comes. Do they have a circle in the Bellator? I don't watch Bellator very much. I want to start watching Bellator, to be honest. A lot of the fighters went over there. But anyway, it really comes out in the fights as well. If you see their precision, their speed, their constant explosiveness, very impressive. But a lot of that has to do with plyometrics and a good diet, like putting the right things in your body. Rafael Dos Anjos eats a lot of plants. He at one point even went vegan. I'm not sure if he still is. I don't think so, but I know he did incorporate a lot of plants in his diet. It helps with cardio, explosiveness, endurance, and all this. So high carb diet is good, and fruit's good, and all these vegetables and everything else is good for fighters and good for longevity of the person as well. So very nice to see a lot of fighters kind of catch on to this and implementing it in their life. One of my favorite fighters right now is Rose Namajunas. I really love her message after her last domination over the reigning champ, who was the reigning champ at strawweight for the longest time, Joanna Jędrzejczyk. I always liked Joanna, but I started thinking that she was starting to get full of herself, and for her to be humbled in that way, then Rose to give that speech after the fight on people should just be kind to one another, and they're, basically giving a lesson to the UFC or to the MMA community that, this whole Conor McGregor phenomenon and post-Conor era of trash talk and just being fake with one another and being aggressive and all that, that's not what martial arts is about. I think Conor did it to be able to build wealth for himself, because it's an industry that requires the fighters, or tells the fighters to promote fights in that way. Says get the fight going, get people interested, create conflict, basically sell out in order to get a bigger paycheck is what they've been being told. Brand themselves, all this nonsense, all this capitalist law of attraction bullshit that it just serves high finance in this pyramidal system. So what I would like to see in the future, like I said, is for real people to have influence over the company, or actually run the company and actually put proceeds from fans and whatnot and whatever money comes in, the currency that comes in, to be put back to the community, so that people, when they buy the merchandise or buy the pay-per-views, they know that it's actually creating opportunities for them locally. And I think that's very important, to get people away from the bars and away from all this degeneracy and whatnot into the gym, and so that people can be strong, confident, and kind to one another, with that confidence and with that humbleness that comes with understanding the body's vulnerabilities, and understanding one another, and having respect for one another, that comes with the intimacy of unarmed combat and grappling and all this skill set and all these things. So, yeah, I mean, that is an ideal future. I think there are just great people that are attracted to MMA and the people that are involved in it. There's so many great people. Brian Ortega, just a stand-up guy. I love this guy's message as well, talking about he wants to do something with his influence that helps people, and he's just a genuine dude, and it's just I'm glad to see these kind of people rise up and sort of take the center stage, take over as far as influence goes, amid the Colby Covingtons and the Conor McGregors and the Tony Ferguson bully mentality, and just this hyping up themselves and all this branding of themselves. It's very nice to see genuine people in there, just displaying their skill, and that being the selling point, that being the appeal, and not being this WWE scenario, fake bullshit. So that's very nice to see. I've been a fan. I've been involved with martial arts and a fan of it since the mid-2000s. I grew up tussling, and getting into tussles and wrestling with others and stuff, and I just always had a propensity towards martial arts. And as I started getting into it in the mid-2000s, in the GSP, Matt Hughes era, that's what really kind of drew me to it. BJ Penn and all these guys when they were in their prime. I was in my early 20s, and I was just captivated by it. And I've been training and wanting to get involved in a gym and stuff ever since. And for people that are low on as far as sort of like low income and from these kind of families and stuff, and people around here, to not have the access to a gym at a low cost, not have it in their school, not have it there for people to be able to learn, I think is a problem. And like I said, I think that would help everything. It would help the new generations be confident, and not be authoritative minded, as far as demanding the authoritative either teachers or the government to protect them, or police. Instead, be their own police themselves, police one another. And I think that's the only way towards autonomy, is that people have confidence in themselves, and not their first reaction when they have a problem to call the government. I mean, that's so common, and I think it's becoming less common now, but dependency on the state is a problem, and it is slavery. Whenever you have an issue and then you resort it by saying, I'm going to sue you, I'm going to take you to court, and just use this bureaucratic, systematic oppression to actually to solve something that could be solved between people on their own, and then also people understanding that not everybody has to get along. It's all a matter of freedom of affiliation. If maybe you can have a mutual respect for someone, but you don't want to be around them all the time, you don't want to live near them or whatever. Everybody should have the freedom to basically live where they want, and to affiliate with who they want, and to not be dogmatized for any sort of natural division that arises from just people. Not division as far as ideological or like warring division, but division as far as people literally not, okay, I don't want to live by these people, or I don't get along, or I don't mesh with these people well in my area, I want to go somewhere else. I mean, that should just be the freedom of anyone to do that. And I think that we're all kind of herded together based on our income instead of based on personalities and character. And a lot of us are now these days, maybe it was a little different in the 90s, but a lot of people are just living wherever they can, not wherever they want. And it's based on their income and everything's based on money, and it's just bullshit because it's just such a struggle to even barely have enough. A lot of places in the world, in America, with the high cost of living, even though with all this technology and all this stuff, I mean, the majority of jobs are less than half of a living wage. You know, at the time in people's lives where they need the most support and a platform in which to be able to have a home, a family in their younger years, be able to be able to find their true love and be able to be with them and have a family and start their family. That's where these companies ran by these Freemasons are running this capitalist class, saying, well, you deserve less money because you're young. This is the inversion of truth. These kids are coming out of high school with no with their parents more and more broke these days, with less and less of a platform, less and less direction, less and less not, I don't want to say comfort in that way, but like foundation, and it's like they're just told go to college and strive, and maybe when you're 30 you can afford to have a family if you're lucky. I mean, that's nonsense. This is called austerity. Jill Stein discusses this. I'm a huge fan of a big endorser of the Green Party, and I hope that this is the new direction that America goes into, and starts to really understand the principles behind the Green Party are actually universal and very, very radical compared to what we're, in a good way, compared to this mainstream bipartisan politics. And I hope that also the Humane Party realizes that the Green Party is good and that they can merge, and it's just one party. It could be the Green Humane Party, Green Humane Autonomy. This is why I named the channel this platform that. It's because I'm trying to connote or evoke a connection between those two parties and two mentalities that are actually one, very similar mentality. So Humane Party being more people-oriented and the Green Party being more environmental, but both of them having similar universal aims, and ought to realize that, come together, guys. Come on. So, I start out talking about MMA, and then I go over to this kind of thing. So, that's not a big surprise, I guess, for anybody listening, or not surprised myself either. But it is all connected. I mean, martial arts is it's a cultural thing. It's like the people are learning how to defend themselves and gaining confidence, and the youth is gaining confidence and learning Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in some areas. And I just think the more that's available and the more opportunity people have to be able to join that kind of thing and be able to learn, the better. And the more people will basically learn confidence, and also to end the cyclical oppression and end fraternity and gangster mentality, where it's like a hazing deal and like a whole climbing the fucking ladder, middle class ladder, climbing that pyramid type mentality, clamoring over one another for profit and for money and all this stuff that, as many of us realize, was wrong to begin with, and now we're seeing the outcome of that being prolonged, and where that leads, and which has led to where we are now, where there either is a turning point towards the better, towards getting rid of this usurious system and actually implementing a true non-usurious currency that is not based in debt, but based in actually a form of trade, a trade tool, which is what currency ought to be used for, and then phasing out of this bullshit system that is underpaying people, is actively and purposely economically suppressing people so that they can't have families and enjoy their lives, so that they're just basically by default trying to literally genocide people, trying to where they can't, the workers cannot, and the people of this country and the people of these lands, the strongest, really, we're in a lot of ways, are actually bred out by the rulers who have this mentality that they're like some sort of like superior people. But more and more time goes on, the more I know a lot of you realize that these people are actually destroying the earth and destroying anything good in this life, and they're parasitic. And they need their children, their future generations need more than anyone else true leadership and direction, so that they're not cycling oppression, because they teach their kids grow up in that atmosphere, and they cycle their parents' oppression, their tribe's oppression, and we have to put a stop to that to save these kids and save this future generations and life, the essence of life, the spiritual essence of life. And so that's paramount the spiritual essence of life is paramount, not the materialistic clamoring over one another like a tribal, primitive thing that's not even classically tribal as far as the tribes that our ancestors went around and just lived off the land, but tribal as in domineering, and life as basically just a form of domination, which is what we're taught, that life came from. Big explosion, the material expansion or physical expansion, and the life was created out of just a circumstance, and it's just a big randomistic thing. Very scary as far as heliocentrism is taught to us. Very inaccurate, actually. A lot of assumptions were made based on observations of the stars that our ancestors looked up and saw there's a spherical nature there must be a spherical nature to this Earth. They assumed we're on a ball. More and more people are starting to question that cosmology that is actually proven false. Some fall into the flat earthers. Myself fall into, based on a couple of different experiments and observations, I believe very much so, that Earth is concave, that it's a spherical concave, not spherical convex, and that the stars are bubbles of light created by sound, and the heavens it's like a wheel turning in the sky. There's a lot of evidence for this, and I know it sounds crazy at first, but there is a lot of evidence for this, and I will leave a link to my video, or you can check it out yourself. Just go over to the Earthy Aquarium. A lot of links to this. It is true. I promise you, the evidence proves it to be so, to much more of an extent than what we've been told of the so-called evidence for heliocentrism, which it's not. There's not the evidence that they say for heliocentrism. They never did geodetic surveys that showed the Earth to be convex. They never did that. The only ones ever done were the rectilineator 4.5 mile level on the Florida coast in the water, and that showed the Earth to be concave, curve up, and then also the Tamarack mine shaft experiment. I believe that was in Michigan, where two lines were hung side by side, and the bottoms of the lines were further apart than the top, which would indicate that the center of gravity is above us, not below, which would indicate concavity as well. So these are like home run experiments that indicate Earth is concave. Not only that, there's Fata Morgana, so-called Fata Morgana effect, and there's just more and more proof of it because of high pixelation and technology improving with cameras, be able to zoom further, be able to see the curve, actually, the upwards curve of the Earth, and objects raised in the distance. The further away they are, the more raised as they go further away. Very, very telling of this truth on top of this experimentation, and I hope that people understand that this is something that is valid, and will look into this themselves, and you'll see. I promise you, but look into it yourself. And this is a huge spiritual turn, because this means that life is central to all of us, and it's a spiritual constant, not necessarily a creation per se, but a spiritual constant that is in tandem with the metaphysical force. And it's very, very much implied with concave Earth compared to being drift in space, everything very far apart, light years away, and all this stuff. The sun's just a big ball of burning gas, and 93 million miles away, and huge. It's going to swallow us up, and we can get hit by an asteroid the size of Earth at any point, and all this fear shit that just gets people thinking life is insignificant. And it's all about colonialism. It's all about expansion into space and all this stuff. And this Earth is barely able to provide life for us. And it's just barely be able to provide life because it's the third rock from the sun. And all these other planets don't have life because we're just happen to be in an exact distance away from the sun. And all this bullshit, guys. It's all fucking bullshit. And it's important for people to know this. It is the turning of the tide with the way people started treating each other after heliocentrism gained momentum. That's when you started seeing genocides. That's when you started seeing colonialism and just this treatment of people as in evolutionary theory and all this stuff, is when heliocentrism gained momentum and became dogmatically enforced. So I would love for people to look into this, because I know it for myself. I'm a very, very analytical mind, and somebody who researches the shit out of something before I would ever commit to it. I considered all the alternatives. I weigh the the likelihood of each and with one another, and I'm just concerned about truth, and that's it. I'm not concerned about promoting myself as some sort of like person who is all knowing and all this stuff. I'm just somebody who's very looks into something, and I have an open mind about things, and I hope to inspire that in others as well, and to actually listen and talk to others in a human way, and not just don't fall for debate. The bait. This whole idea that we have to just be at each other's throats and talk in such a way where we're just trying to prove one another or ourselves to be right over the other person. I think that is something that we've kind of we've grown up to just think is just is part of just what a free society is, to just constantly argue with one another and prove like that you're right over the other person, and then this bipartisanship sort of mentality, a political mentality, instead of like a cooperative thing or agree to disagree or mutual respect thing, morals. And but I do believe that this is true, and from what I've seen, and I hope that people will check it out. Anyway, guys, I don't want to keep going on here. I hope you like this video. It is a bit I'm going off on a tangent about a different cellular cosmogony, or what I like to call the aquarium, ecological terrarium, which I believe Earth is. And I think that the more time goes on, the more people will actually see, and actually the truth will be just more and more obvious. That is the nature of truth, like Schopenhauer said, and I believe he said truth passes through three phases. First, it's ridiculed. Secondly, it's violently opposed. And third, it's accepted as self-evident. We're kind of in the violently opposed stage right now, with these kids being killed, and the establishment freaking out, and the mainstream just unleashing all this counter propaganda against like truthers and people actually investigating this stuff, calling us all right wingers and all this shit. And like, I've been approached by Masons and fired from my job unexpectedly. Like, the only job I can get is with family and getting paid cash right now. It's ridiculous. I don't even have a huge following or anything. I don't have a lot of subscribers. I don't have like a huge, on paper, it doesn't look like I'm doing all that much, I guess. But with my influence, my potential, I think is what is most being targeted right now. And I've had to deal with some weird shit. So if I do end up disappearing off, you don't hear about me or something happen, people, will say stuff and realize that, something had happened to me. Or if you see in the news or something that I've been blamed for something that I didn't do, that's also a possibility. We all face that possibility of being dealing with this opposition that is grasping at straws at this point. And the thing that feeds them is our fear. So this is why I very much am very proud of people for just speaking their mind and just being open about recently about they calling out the establishment for what it is, and this shadow government, this high finance, and this usury. There's too many of us that are just speaking the same truths for them to just all rally, or all for them to even deal with us in a way that they would prefer, which would be treat us like they do the Palestinians. They've been able to utilize deception to a greater extent prior to some of these technologies, even though they are utilizing the technology in their favor. But we're also using it, and this technology did not come from their mind. It came from somebody who was very much like a lot of us, and that's in their spirit. Somebody who wasn't a part of the Freemasonic establishment, like Thomas Jefferson was. Thomas Edison. And who I'm talking about is Nikola Tesla. So, this is the spirit of this technology, comes from this electronic technology to be able to communicate with one another in this way. It does not come from the mind of these people. It does not come from the soul of these people. And these people initially rejected it. Edison tried his hardest to reject, to defame, and to prevent alternating current, the basis of this technology, from ever getting out. So really, this is our time, this is our technology, and it will be used for our purposes to actually create a beautiful world. And I'm certain about this, and I hope that others are excited about the future and, despite all this tragedy, can see the light now, because now the more and more they fuck up, the more and more people are waking up, and they are, like always, serving their own demise, leading to their own self-destruction, which is the case with all parasitic life. And is our duty, my duty, personally, I feel a universally ordained duty to stop the cyclic oppression, to prevent it, to cure this disease from its root. And I feel in my heart that a lot of that has to do with, it's a spiritual turn, because if not for people spiritually turning against the essence of life as being a spiritual constant and towards this heliocentric bullshit cosmology that we've been indoctrinated into, I don't believe that money power would have ever existed. I don't believe machinery would have ever existed. And I don't believe that there had been colonialism, all this colonialism anyway, and all this genocide and ongoing wars. I don't even believe that weapons of mass destruction would have ever been created. I think that a lot of things are in correlation with the spiritual turn of the people, because of heliocentrism, because of that, adopting that, and that mentality of life as physical expansion and cognition as a result of physical expansion, and not a spiritual constant. So if you understand what I'm saying with that, I hope you do anyway. And I hope you enjoy the content. And if you do and you haven't, please subscribe and like this video and comment. See ya.